So again, my name is Dan Silly. I'm the CEO and founder of Vendor Neutral. We help organizations identify, select, integrate, onboard, and adopt these types of technologies, sales enablement, sales technology, revenue operations resources, so that they can see the long-term ROI they deserve. We work with well over 850 solutions globally, and our clients who are in many cases very large enterprise organizations as well as large mid-market organizations. But our website is loaded with resources, free resources for you who are attending this webinar and those of you watching this on demand to leverage at any point. We offer hundreds of blog posts. I think there's over 70 webinars over the last couple of years surrounding many different subjects that are around sales technology, and then also many, many podcasts. So today I'd like to first introduce you to our panel, and then I'll let them all introduce themselves as well. But we have Daniel Lewis here, Director of Revenue Operations at Sales Intel. We have Beverly Heyman, Director of Sales Enablement at Big Tin Can. And then we have Carter Perez, CRO, Chief Revenue Officer for Revenue Grid. So why don't we start with you, Daniel? Why don't you do a quick introduction and tell them a little about yourself and your company?
Yeah, well, my name is Daniel Lewis. I'm the Director of Revenue Operations. So I'm in charge of all the systems that our revenue teams use. So marketing automations in HubSpot, our CRM is Salesforce, and our customer success teams manage their business through Churn Zero. And so I oversee not only making sure all those tools work for those individual teams, but orchestrating data between all those systems. And my background, I started as a SDR. I managed SDR teams and then went into sales and sales operations, and now Director of Revenue Operations, overseeing everything the revenue team touches. And at Sales Intel, we provide business-to-business contact data. We have most sources. We own our own sources of data, so we have more mobile numbers than most of our competitors. Plus, we have more rich sources of account data, including intent data, visitor intel, and more to help our teams achieve their revenue goals faster.
Thank you, Daniel. Beverly, you can introduce yourself and your organization.
Thanks, Dan. And first, I just want to thank you for having us on today. I'm really excited to be here. My name is Beverly Heyman. I'm the Director of Sales Enablement at Big Tin Can. And my background, I had been in sales, number of different management positions for about 15 plus years. And then for the last 5 years, I have been heading up sales enablement. So in our organization, we have approximately 100 reps that we are working with just to assure that they are on message. And if you think about Big Tin Can, we are a sales enablement solution, a comprehensive solution. We have 3 different hubs. The first one being that of the content hub. So it allows you to manage your content so that we are able to direct the right content to sales reps so that the conversations are more effective. Our second hub is what we call the learning hub, which involves both training and coaching. And the third one is our engagement hub. So I, as an enablement leader, can see what content my reps are using, what content my prospects and customers are engaged in, and can then change all of the levers just to make sure that the sales process is going more smoothly.
Excellent, Beverly, thank you. And Carter Perez, Chief Revenue Officer at Revenue Grid, why don't you introduce yourself and your organization?
Thanks, Dan, and I echo the comments that Beverly made. Excited for today's webinar. So I've spent my career in sales and sales management and currently lead the organization at Revenue Grid. Revenue Grid is a revenue intelligence platform, and what that means is that whether you're a rep, a manager, or somebody like me, a CRO, we are going to consolidate all the various signals that you might be getting throughout the sales process, whether it's emails, conversations, LinkedIn information, and a host of other data into a single platform that integrates with Salesforce natively and helps revenue leaders make and exceed their forecast by providing signals for at-risk deals and a host of other data points inside of an opportunity. So excited to be here today and contribute.
Thank you so much. I'm going to start off this webinar by asking all of you a question before we jump into the specific subject matter. And it's just, why should RevOps be an important part of any organization today, especially as we look, into 2022 and beyond? Why is RevOps becoming such a crucial resource? And Beverly, I'll start with you. What are your thoughts?
Sure. Well, right, I think data is king, right? The more data that you have, whether it's internal data, in my case, what are my sales reps doing? What are the processes they're going through? What are the challenges that they're running into? And externally, what are our customers thinking about, and how are they using the content that we're sending out to them? In my role, the more that I have a pulse on that type of data, the better I can be in changing behaviors and changing outcomes. So, without that data, you're working off of a gut feeling, and by having that data, able to provide credibility and accountability to why I'm spending my time focused in on certain areas.
Excellent answer. Carter?
I think there was a stat out recently that something like 53% of sales reps make their forecast. So with that type of performance out there, as folks responsible for leading the revenue operations or the sales organization, we need as many tools as we can get to help our sales reps get on track, stay on track, and achieve their forecasts. So I think it's critical that we're putting tools and processes in place to help support them and to achieve our overall revenue objectives.
Excellent. Daniel?
Oh man, over time, organizations are collecting more and more data points than ever. And so just being able to filter out what's good and what's bad and make sure data is matching across systems and teams, especially if you're trying to do an ABM approach, you need to make sure that everyone's on the same page, that teams aren't running into each other unnecessarily, and you're maximizing revenue, as well as maximizing your value to your clients or your prospects.
Absolutely. From my perspective as well, RevOps operates with the goal of increasing revenue in a predictable and a sustainable way. So I totally agree with all of your comments. I feel it's a very important resource. It's becoming invaluable for large organizations, right down to smaller size companies as well. So let me share my screen again. So jump into the first slide here. What technologies are enabling you to capture, analyze, and to monetize your company's biggest asset beyond your staff? And again, why is data so important? So I'll start with you, Carter.
I mean, look, it's the fuel that goes into our engine, right? I think selling and marketing has made an incredible transition over the past 10 years, where now 70% of the buying process is happening online, and there are a ton of digital nuggets out there that can help you understand who in the market is researching your product or service, how they're consuming it, what they're interested in, and give you, as a seller, all sorts of unbelievable clues that will help you compress the sales cycle and improve your win rates.
Excellent. Daniel?
Yeah, because it goes beyond website data that marketing automation's been collecting for years. Like you said, Carter, you have more intent data out there. Who's searching for not only your products on, say, G2, or who's searching for your competitors? You can now capture more of that. And that's still, they may just not be aware that you're there, you're a competitor. And so you can interject yourself, you know that they're in the buying cycle, if you know they're searching for similar things. But yeah, data is, geez, so important because more and more companies, especially in mid-market and enterprise, it's an ABM focus now that you're trying to pull as many of the buying levers or influence the buying levers at a client organization. So I think that's about all I have to add.
Beverly?
I agree with what everyone said. I just want to add a couple points to that. So, to Carter's point as to we are in a scenario right now where our buyers are doing so much on their own. We also did an analysis and we found that if you think about the whole sales cycle, and in most cases you're up against 2 or 3 other competitors, we only have about 17% of that buyer's time in the entire sales cycle. So if you have such a limited amount of time, you want to make sure you're using the right data points and the right content to have the biggest impression on them. So that's one area. The other thing I think too is to both of their points, when you think about that data, you want to make sure that the data that you're using in that is aligning between marketing and sales, because sometimes there's a little bit of a disconnect. So using that data appropriately helps bring those two groups closer together and to better address your buyer's journey. And then my hat's a little different, right? Because I'm in sales enablement. So I'm using that data internally, but that data is sort of my guiding light as to where should myself and my team be spending time on better programs to help my sales reps be more effective, because I can uncover that data and understand where there are gaps in competencies and skills, and then I can start addressing those gaps.
No, absolutely agree, Beverly. In our pre-planning meeting for this webinar, we talked about that, and it's on this slide. It's the engine won't run without gas, and that gas is data within our organizations. So Daniel, I'm going to come back to you on this because this is where you shine. Your organization delivers data to many organizations out there surrounding these specific requirements. And as we discussed in our pre-meeting, 3% of data becomes obsolete every month, right? And as we all know, the big resignation, hashtag big resignation, 2021, almost half of all businesses contacts changed, and half of their employees found new jobs. So Daniel, can you dive into that a little bit more?
Yeah, so it's a well-accepted fact that 25% of all business contact data decays or goes bad after a year. And our data at Sales Intel, since we collect it and we sell this to our customers, we saw that nearly half of all people had a significant career change, both internal movement from one job function to another, getting promoted, moving from sales to enablement, or the Great Resignation. They stopped working, they changed companies, and it's really created the need to have a good data provider or a good data pipeline that feeds your marketing teams. Because if you're emailing people who don't exist in an organization, your deliverability score goes down. It hurts your reputation score, and nothing kills a sales call faster than asking for someone who hasn't worked there in many months.
Oh, that's the truth, Daniel. So I'm going to ask all of you a quick question before we go on to the next slide, is how have each of your individual organizations adapted? I know we're talking about a bigger picture strategy here for organizations, but just take a moment and kind of speak to, what each of you have done. So Daniel, I'll go back to you again. How has your organization adapted? What are you doing slightly differently? And again, you lead this role, so I'm sure you have a lot of thoughts around this and how your organization is taking a new direction.
Yeah, for us as a company, it's trying to refresh our data more rapidly than we have in the past. And so for just our own benefit, as well as the benefit of our customers, we've increase the number of researchers we have. So one of the strengths of Sales Intel is we human verify the contact data that we put out there. Make sure the email is good. It doesn't bounce. The direct dial numbers go to that person still, or the mobile numbers go to that person. Really, one of the challenges for us is operationalizing that. Since the data is turning over so quickly, how do we make sure that we're able to pull that out at scale and deliver it to our customers, or our internal customers, the sales team? And then also taking into account that so much research happens beforehand, we've remapped our buyer's journey and gone more granular from just who's interacting with any content with, are they interacting with early, mid, or late stage buying content, so that we can tailor the message that we do when we're doing outbound outreach. Since it's easy, if someone fills out a form, you know they're in a buying mode when you hand them over to your inbound teams. And but it's accounting for everything that's not inbound has been our challenge.
Oh, excellent. Very good. Carter, what are your thoughts? So how has your organization evolved?
Yeah, for us, it's about looking at new data sources to ingest that continue to signal intent. So as I think Daniel mentioned, whether it's G2 crowd information or LinkedIn title changes, whether internal or external, it's, getting that into our platform and then being able to intelligently use it to indicate deal quality, right? So, we know that we've got an issue if our economic buyer has just changed jobs and moved to a different company, and we're forecasting that to close this quarter. So that's probably going to be an issue for us. And we're able now to surface that type of information to help sellers.
Excellent. Beverly, you had some insight from Big Tin Can's perspective.
Yeah, I would say one of the most important things that we have done as an organization is just to collaborate more on that data. And I think that, we've built a much stronger relationship with our RevOps department, so that we're sort of tied at the hip to understand that data. And I think oftentimes in organizations, we tend to all, we're in our own silo. And so a lot of that data isn't being shared across the organization. So, Carter, to your point that you mentioned earlier, when, if you're using MedPick and you see a change, in a buyer or a decision criteria, to sort of share that data across the organization through our both our, SE organization, to sort of give a heads up to our CSM teams on what's happening with expansion opportunities, so that we just have better controlled on, a predictable revenue stream.
Excellent. Let's go to the next slide here. Whoop, sorry about that. Here we go. Okay, so why revenue operations must be interdisciplinary between sales, marketing, customer success, and other relevant departments. Again, a key bullet here is sales enablement and revenue enablement, right? New category, go-to-market strategies. So Beverly, I'll start with you on this one. What are your thoughts?
So I think, many of us on the call are probably working in a SaaS environment. And so when you think about the importance of that renewal, my belief is you should take a step back. You should first understand, what is that buyer's journey? What are they trying to accomplish? What is important to them? And then to look at your sales stages and to make sure that you align with the buyer's journey. It isn't so much about when we want to close the deal. It's, when is the deal going to close because of that buyer's journey. So I think it's really important that working with RevOps, you have that alignment there. The other thing, when we talk about revenue enablement, right? The deal doesn't stop when the contract is signed. We then need to make sure that transition from sales to customer success is a smooth transition, that all of that data is going with them, that the customer doesn't feel that they have to tell their story again, tell the outcome that they want. And that as we're going through the the customer success life cycle, that the metrics that they're trying to achieve are being measured, and that information again is being fed back to the account managers. So when it comes time for renewal, everybody's sort of aligned on what was it we tried to accomplish, what was the outcome, and just having a pulse on the customer's satisfaction level.
Very good. Carter?
Yeah, I think it's absolutely critical. Look, as we think about the buyer's journey, it's critical that we keep everyone inside of each of our companies aligned with what that journey is and the experience that the buyer has throughout it. So, if we're, for example, doing ABM and, marketing is running that ABM campaign or platform, and sales isn't aware of the messaging or isn't up to speed, then it can be a disjointed experience for the buyer. And given the competitiveness that's out there in the market today, those folks that provide the best buyer journey or buyer experience are going to win the deal. So it absolutely is fundamental to ensuring that we deliver on our commitments.
And Daniel?
Yeah, it needs to be interdisciplinary, just because the buyer's journey is less linear now than it ever has been. And so it goes from marketing to BDRs to sales, and at any point, your decision maker could leave. 50% chance that it's a new decision maker coming in. You have to start all over again. Or as people kick the tires, you use that intent data. They may be earlier in the journey than you think they are when you hand them off to sales. So constantly being able to revisit where someone is and respond to where they're at in their buying process. But then that means there's a primary team who's in charge of contacting them, so you have to make sure that data is moving back and forth at all times. Or if you've been around long enough, you'll see ex-customers returning to be new customers again. So you have to have that good handoff between customer success back over to marketing.
Absolutely. I'm going to go back to the slide here. This is going to go back to the previous slide. So I agree totally. We have to really rethink how we are adjusting to how people want to buy, right? How they want to be engaged with. The funnel has changed dramatically. Some people say it's now an hourglass. Some people say you flipped it over completely. But at the end of the day, it's about embracing a buyer's journey, right? Working with them, collaborating with them, partnering with them to achieve their goals. You have to bring a lot of value before we start talking about product. To start to jump right into our solutions and our capabilities isn't going to really help them. They really need to understand the why these resources can potentially add value, and that is really starts with an understanding, right? Understanding, what they want, what they need, what their stakeholders are telling them they want and need, and that isn't the beginning, that isn't the end. The reality is that we have to drill down into the hierarchy of these organizations, right to the end users. And what is enabling them to be successful every day? How are they engaging with prospects? What tools are they leveraging? A lot of organizations, we see this very often, is they're leveraging tools at a user level that they're not buying at a company level, right? Individual users are going out and buying their own resources. I'd love to get your feedback on that. I'll go right to you, Beverly, on this, because you work in sales enablement, so I'm sure you've seen this. What types of tools are you seeing leveraged by your reps, your teams, on a regular basis that they may just be using at an individual level?
Well, I would say oftentimes if it's at an individual level, I'll get notified of it from the perspective that it's when it's a success, right? Mm-hmm. And so then, it'll sort of trickle up to me that, hey, I'm doing this. Here's why I chose to do this, and here's the outcome. I think for me, some of the best ideas I've gotten have been, from reps that have, my A reps that have tried something different, and we've been able to take that idea and scale it across the organization. So I would say, some of the tools just revolve around, better prospecting capabilities, or getting better data, or having a pulse on, who is looking at our products, so that we have a better idea of where they are in the sales cycle.
I have to agree with that totally, Beverly, because I did a presentation at Johns Hopkins a week ago, Monday, and it was around the evolution of CRM, right? Around how CRM is evolving. One of the data points that I referenced, and I think it really adds a lot of value here, is that yes, 20% of your business comes from, 80% of your business comes from 20% of your customers. But I can tell you this as well. 80% of your best ideas, your best technology resources, thoughts around your customer engagement strategy come from your 20% of your reps. And that's normally your top performers. You've got to take a step back, right? We've got to listen to these individuals. We've got to incorporate them in the technology buying process. They add incredible level of value to this decision-making strategy. They know what's working. They know what their clients are telling them. They know what their clients want. We have to take that information and internalize it and use that as part of our strategy. Carter, Daniel, either of you have any additional perspective?
Can I just add one point though, Dan, to what you said? I totally agree with you. I think, now coming out of the pandemic, we're going to have that ability to have those water cooler chats, right? Where people can share what they're doing. I think the challenge many of us, in ops and enablement have run into over the last few years is, everybody sort of, working in their remote office. So how do you extract that information to make sure that, you're hearing about it, and then you're able to apply that, that tribal knowledge across the organization?
Oh, I got to ask you another question now, Beverly. What tools are you using to do that? Like, what type of resources do you use to share that knowledge?
Well, we drink our own champagne here
Sure.
at Big Tin Can, right? So we are using BrainShark. The coaching piece of our application, I don't always use it so much to educate as to pull data from my sales reps. So, tell me how you're handling this selling situation, or what are some of the common objectives you're running into. And then I take that information and I repurpose it to the rest of the organization so that I'm able to share those peer-to-peer knowledge.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Carter, Daniel, what are your thoughts?
For me, I think it's where I find the reps being creative is two areas. One, anything that can remove friction from the buying process. So if that's something like calendar scheduling software that allows the buyer to pick a time and date that's convenient for them. On the cutting edge, I'm starting to see some reps use automatic content generation, AI assistants to write follow-up emails and things like that. So that's a really interesting emerging trend.
Very good. Daniel, love to hear your perception on this as well.
Yeah, well, for inter-team collaboration, we do a lot with Slack. We announce all of our wins, both when BDR set up meetings for AEs, that's announced, how they did it, what was the last message they sent. When AEs win, and our success teams win business, they post that publicly on Slack channels as well, so that we can see, hey, what was it that the company does? Why did they buy sales intel? So that we can all learn from that and get those tips and tricks. And that's where we sometimes find out the new tools people are using. To answer your earlier question, we found out that a few reps have been experimenting with video tools, and they're not using the big names like Vidyard. And we were hesitant to get a tool like that for the entire org because it's an expensive one, both from a cost perspective to get it for an enterprise, as well as from RevOps to set it up. If you're not sure the reps are going to use it, especially since not everyone is comfortable. If you polled your reps, most would say they're not comfortable creating a 30-second video for every prospect. And so, and sometimes you need that ground up upswell of reps, a handful of your top performing reps saying, this worked for me, and have that script for people. And so we've had that work enough times. We're now taking a look at some of those enterprise solutions that we can recommend, and we can have that has templates. We can roll it out and have a good user experience, not only for prospects, but also our sales teams.
Yeah,
Daniel, I think what's so
Oh.
important about that is that the message is coming from their peers, right? Versus when I say to the reps, here's a great way for you to do X. It's sort of like I don't know, for those of you that have kids, I have kids, they're not going to listen to me, but if their siblings say, this is how you should do things, they definitely listen to it. And I do find that the more you can leverage, that tribal knowledge and the sharing of those best practices, in your case, here's how this video helped me, the more apt they're likely to do it, right?
I
Correct.
couldn't agree more.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and of course you get that upswell, and then once you bring a product, you make that organization-wide decision, then it's even interdisciplinary. Like for RevOps, I can build the greatest tool, but if our reps and sales teams don't know how to use it, it's wasted effort. So I rely heavily on our enablement teams, and I'm thankful for them every single day, because they're teaching, they're doing that initial instruction when we're onboarding, they're doing ongoing education and sharing, making sure to facilitate, be that human piece to push those best practices, collect all those best practices, and teach it on our monthly trainings. And so everything's interdisciplinary, even internal. Like I'd be working very closely with Beverly and Carter if we were all in the same organization.
Absolutely. I think back, I've been doing this, I've been in sales for a very long time, but I think back what used to be a weekly meeting, right, with your team where you discuss best practices, then, evolved to be, a daily discussion where one individual will share the best practices from a previous day, their successes. Now it's really on demand, right? It's about Slack. It's about technologies that enable us all to have visibility into each other's activities throughout the day. And when you could have a knowledge base that can share that tribal knowledge, right? That where it can be easily accessible, or you could ask a question of a peer very quickly and say, hey, how did you do this? How did you tried this? How did it work for you? I find that to be incredibly valuable, and technology is leading that charge for sure. Any other comments on that? Anybody?
Yeah, it's there's so much data out there, and thinking to Netflix, I get so many recommendations on Netflix, but what I watch next is usually what my friends say is an awesome show. And so it's always, now we're seeing, the pendulum swing back, as we went all digital now to put more human components in there. So it's AI and data is not the be all end all.
Nope. And Carter or Beverly, any other final comments on that?
Totally agree with what Daniel said.
Yeah,
absolutely. I think for 2 years, we've been all waiting for the norm to return. And I don't think it's ever going to come back, right? I don't think normal business is ever going to return to the way it was. I think we're all adapting. I can definitely see that with our clients. They said, oh, this will be 6 months and then we'll get back to normal. We'll leverage these hybrid tools and then we'll go back to the face-to-face meetings in the office. The reality is most people don't want to go back to the office. Most people haven't yet. They're still working from home. They like that hybrid working environment. They like the resources they can leverage. They like the access they have to their peers. But there are a lot of people that do like that face-to-face interaction. They want to work around the water cooler, have those discussions once in a while. Any comments around that? Any comments around, how things have really changed, but for the better in a lot of ways? And I'll go to you, Carter, for that first.
Yeah, I mean, look, I totally agree with you. I think this is the new norm. And I think, through force, we were all kind of, herded into digital meetings and everything. And I think, in the past, I don't know about you, but I certainly used to cringe when my dog would run in and when I was in the middle of a webinar or something like that. And now, I think given everyone's exposure to the new medium and use of it, things like that are much more acceptable. And while you always hope that they don't happen, if it does, it's not a major source of embarrassment or doesn't make YouTube because your toddler ran naked behind you.
Stuff happens, right?
That's right.
We have to live with it. Daniel, what are your thoughts around this new norm?
I really embraced the new normal. I didn't really like the old normal as much, I think it personalizes it. I like the flexibility and the freedom that you get to see people with their kids on a call. It humanizes them. It also, hey, if you need to wrap up the call and the kid's looking for lunch, hey, everyone agrees to wrap up the call a few minutes early. I don't think I've ever been in a meeting that needed to run 5 minutes longer.
Yeah.
But I really like it. It's also in some ways more inclusive. In the revenue org, some people want to be in their own world, be free from distractions, and it helps those individuals work better when they're in that home environment. And then if you still want to interact with your peers, you have now those channels on Slack. You can still do an impromptu Zoom call. So I think the new normal and everyone adapting to how they want to use technology, because I think with technology, you get to opt into how you want to react. You don't get 5 people coming up into your computer, into your home, like you did when you were in an office, when people can just walk up to your desk.
You're right. You're 100% correct. So I think we'll go on to the next slide. Great discussion. Really appreciate all of your feedback. How to treat RevOps as a system and why that's critical for business growth. I mentioned this earlier. It's so important to put our prospects into our customers at the center. We have to understand their journey before we start offering ours to them. So, what is some of your feedback here on surrounding, how we treat this as a system, as a buyer's journey, and which is not linear. Buyers are more likely to be educated and knowledgeable, as we all know. I think the percentages out there between 60 and 85% of buyers are that close to their decision-making surrounding a piece of technology or a solution or a service before they even engage with us as a organization or as a product or a solution. What are your thoughts? I'll start with you, Beverly.
I would almost change your question from the perspective of, if you don't think about RevOps, you're putting yourself in a position where you could stifle your business growth, right? Because, to me, in my role, the RevOps team is just critical to my success. They're the ones that are sort of crunching the data, that have a good pulse on, what's happening with our forecast, with our opportunities, sales stages, where people are getting stuck, et cetera. So I rely on them heavily. And, I would say to anyone in my position, if you don't have a close relationship with RevOps, you should really work to build that relationship, because it makes my role that much easier. The more data we have to understand that journey, the more effective we're going to be at it.
Very good. Daniel, I know this is your neck of the woods, so what are your thoughts?
Yeah, because RevOps needs to be a system, because as teams get more specialized, for instance, BDRs set meetings, AEs run meetings, that, and you see that with all the job functions. I think RevOps is in a unique position because we make sure that those handoffs are happening. We see what's going on in all the different systems, and we can use that data, be the canary in the mine for the managers, the frontline reps on each team. That sometimes when customers are raising their hand, they may be really early in the buyer's journey, not late, because you and your competitors, you don't have a lot of information on your websites. You're specifically vague. And so it's, using, I think RevOps has to be a facilitator for everything. We facilitate those handoffs, but facilitate people being able to absorb all that information that's at their disposal and being able to filter it when necessary so that they know what's relevant to them.
Thank you, Daniel. We have a question for you, Daniel. So Carmen asks, do you think organizations are overspending in data tools and technology? While some of it is most of it gets old or unused, or there are not enough talents to fully understand what that data means. What are your thoughts, Daniel?
That's one that's, geez, I was on a panel yesterday about some of this, but there's a lot of tools that can do multiple things. And sometimes you see a new shiny tool and sometimes you want to get it, or you have a few very vocal people. I always say, try to resist the temptation to have too many tools. We all see this, if anyone who has kids or you have friends that have kids, and you're saying, hey, why do all my kids have 8 systems to log into just to do math homework? Think about how a BDR feels if you have 8 systems just for them to complete a sequence. And so it's not necessarily don't spend on tools, but make sure you're selective, that each tool has a purpose and that both you and your teams know what the purpose of that tool is. And then in the course of your research, see, for example, HubSpot has a sales application that has calendars, it has sequences. If you're already utilizing HubSpot, can that meet your needs? Or have you maybe outgrown HubSpot sales? And so it's making sure that you evaluate your tools on a regular basis to make sure you're maximizing your value out of those tools and not wasting them. And when you find a tool's being wasted, don't throw good time after bad money. Just cut your losses and move on.
Oh, excellent answer, Daniel. Again, anyone who has any questions, add them to chat or Q&A. We'd be happy to answer them as we progress or at the end of the webinar if we have time. So don't hesitate to ask those questions. I'm going to go back to share my screen. And Carter, I'd love to get your feedback. We kind of jumped off track a little with Daniel on the question, but I'd love to get your feedback on the perspective of this slide as well.
Yeah, for me, it's about 3 things. It's about buyer insights. So what, as a RevOps function, what can we do to surface, whether it's intent data or competitive intelligence or anything like that, up to the selling team so that they can take action on it and hopefully improve our chance of winning that deal. And then the 2 other areas that are hypercritical for me is they help me spot either process issues or training issues. And so as a RevOps team, I rely very heavily on my team to look at conversion rates by stage and a whole host of other information to really help me understand organizationally, do I have a process problem and I need to really rip my sales process or my outreach process apart and re-engineer it? Or do I have individual or team training issues and those that I can address? The process is okay, but I just need to go lean in a little bit further on training to help them improve their skill there. So those are the 3 areas that I work really closely with my RevOps team on.
Very good. So again, alignment of sales and marketing and customer success operations across a full customer life cycle to drive growth through operational efficiency and to keep all the teams accountable for that revenue, right? Has there been a realization of the importance of alignment in your teams? Your own best practices, I'd love to hear a little bit more. I think the audience would as well. How are you addressing that importance? And have you adapted or have you made changes within your organization surrounding that alignment? I'll start with you, Beverly, because I know this really speaks to sales enablement and also to revenue enablement, but I'll start with you, Beverly.
So I would say that we've made changes across the organization. One example that comes up for me is through my work with our RevOps team, we were seeing that we were not as effective on our MEDDIC criteria. And, all of us know that MEDDIC is just a great compass as to, is that deal going to close in a specific quarter? And so in working with, knowing that from RevOps, it allowed me to pivot and to start focusing in on some of the criteria where the reps were sort of challenged on, to work with them on some additional training, to share some strategies on what they could be doing, so that we were able to, change behaviors and sort of the trajectory of some accounts that would have gotten delayed had I not, worked as closely with RevOps on those conversion rates. So that's, just one small example of where it comes to play. Yeah, so I think it's, critical not only between RevOps, but to be sharing that knowledge across the sales organization so that people have more insights as to, the changes, whether it's in process and or just sales behavior that needs to take place to have a more, reliable forecast.
Very good. Carter, how have you adapted, and how are you really, enforcing this strategy in your organization?
Yeah, I think one of the things we're making investments in is data science. So as an example, we've been able to correlate that our close ratio goes up significantly if we have 5 or more meetings with a prospect. And so we're able to then surface that information. And one of the triggers or signals that I've got is show me every account where we've had 4 meetings. And then I can go back and work with my managers or work with the reps to, put in place that 5th meeting and make sure that we're increasing our likelihood to win. So it's about, figuring out what activities and resources or assets correlate most closely with winning a deal, and then surfacing that to the team so that they can use it.
Carter, we did a similar scenario, but we did it with multi-threading. So we went back and did an analysis on multi-threading, and then, went back to the reps to talk about that.
Yeah, that's another highly correlated data point for us as well.
Daniel?
Yeah, geez, both of those are true. We've noticed like an ABM approach, being able to multi-thread different departments or win a deal with one department and have it be able to pass that information. Hey, these are other departments from the sales perspective where we think we could have made progress, but we wanted to land the client. It's easier to expand it at times than it is to try to land the entire whale. And so even when doing that, you've got to share data. You have to have an avenue for the teams to share data, both on Slack, but you also need to have the revenue systems in place. So there's a permanent record that someone said, hey, we should go after these people at this position within the company. And so this is I think an area where the revenue systems can support the people and the process that you have in place and make it stronger.
Agreed. I'm going to go to the next slide, last slide here for our discussion, where we are running a little low on time, about 8 minutes left. So why having a common purpose is essential, including a buyer-centric strategy that drives your revenue approach. We talked about a little bit about this earlier, how important that being on that buyer's journey to align with that prospect. And as I mentioned earlier, 65 to 80% of their research is done prior to engaging. Right? Your time is short. You must bring the greatest value to your prospects. So let's talk a little bit about that, how we are bringing that value to the prospects, to the buyer. And Carter, I'll start with you.
Sure. I think for us, it's all about time to value. We've, through looking at some of our most successful customers, identified a number of activities that those successful customers take in a given period of time, and then we have re-architected our onboarding and support strategies to reinforce those. So we're seeing, our whole intent is to work with the buyer and help them get as much value from our product in as little time as they can.
Absolutely. Buyer value is becoming a very competitive advantage for sellers. I can't agree more. So Beverly, your thoughts?
I would echo what Carter said. The other thing that we are doing is just making sure that the reps are listening, right? That they are not just, pitching solution early. We want to make sure they drill down deep into, what is the problem? How is that problem impacting? What are the repercussions? What is the outcome that you want? And then understanding that before we start, talking about where our solution lies. So I would say that's one thing. And then the other thing that we do leverage is we do a win-loss analysis. So there's a lot we can learn from our wins, but there's also a lot we could learn from our losses. So we are trying to evaluate that data in more detail so we can be more aligned to that buyer journey.
Excellent. And Daniel.
Yeah, well, this buyer value has a lot of axes on it. Like, what do you need now? And if you're a growing org, what are you going to need in a year, 2 years from now? And so then sometimes companies are buying not only on what you have now, but also your roadmap. And then when you're doing those types of things, you've got to have that alignment now between your product teams and your sales teams. And so, so your company has to be aligned on that common purpose, is to make sure that the product is making things that people want to buy, or that's going to drive revenue, keep your customers, especially since software becomes more competitive. Contracts are shorter and shorter. Heck, even Microsoft no longer requires a 5-year contract anymore on some of their big deals. And so you're really seeing that the faster cycles, you have to win customers more often. I think you said that earlier, Beverly. The sale doesn't stop when they sign the first contract. They're renewing in 12 months. And that means that buyer cycle is starting in 6 to 9 months.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Just to reiterate some of your feedback here, it's just no longer about feeds and speeds, right? It's about solving problems. And absolutely agree with you, Beverly. Better listeners are becoming far more successful than those who ignore and just vomit information over to the prospects. I also, Beverly, really appreciate your comments around win-loss best practices. And I'd love to get your feedback from Daniel and from Carter as well as we close out this webinar. What is the value of win-loss, right? What is the effort of understanding, closed-won, closed-loss opportunities and how they can benefit us moving forward? So I'll start with you, Daniel. Go ahead.
Oh, obvious value of closed won. What's working. Why are people buying now? I think closed loss, though, gives you a lot of great ideas for what to put on the roadmap. If there's common threads to why you're losing business, then that can be a process issue with your sales team. It can be maybe a product issue. But I think the losses give you more chances for improvement. You don't, at least me personally, you don't necessarily win as much learn as much when you win. You usually sit down and you think real hard about why you lost. And that's where I think most of the growth moments happen.
Absolutely. And Carter?
Yeah, we have a statement or a saying that says win or learn. And so, the loss analysis is critical in helping us, to Daniel's point, understand, what needs to be tweaked. Is it product where we fell short? Was our messaging not accurate or could have been improved? Was it a sales skill issue, sales process issue, etc.? So that data coming back in really is instrumental in helping us iterate and improve.
Well, I have to thank all of you very much. Again, revenue ops is obviously becoming an incredibly important aspect of our business. I think businesses big and small need to start adopting these resources and thinking about the technology that can also support them to be effective and efficient. So thank you, Beverly. Thank you, Carter. Thank you, Daniel, for taking the time today and joining us. Thank you all of those of you who attended and will be watching this on demand. Again, Vendor Neutral is here to help serve you on the identification, selection, integration, adoption, and so that you can find the long-term ROI you deserve from these resources. Thank you all. Have a wonderful day. Thanks for joining our webinar.